You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama and Tennessee syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national covering down on all the issues. And, oh yeah, like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to it. It's a brand spanking new week. It's beautiful outside. We like to call this Meatloaf Monday. Play it.
I think I'll try the meatloaf sandwich.
Do you know what that is?
Yes, meatloaf.
What is it? I'm only asking in case I have to describe it later to a doctor.
Look, it's nutritious. It's delicious.
Made out of meat. Add ketchup if you want. I couldn't care less.
Why is that so funny? That just cracks me up. I have no. Big Rig's the one who put that together. I have no idea where he got all those sound effects from.
King of the Hill, the cartoon.
King of the Hill?
Yes.
Meatloaf every time, King of the Hill?
Not all of them, but a lot of them were. I love King of the Hill's a great cartoon.
All right, fresh off of watching too much of the Masters over the weekend, that's JP on the board. Hey, man.
I think I watched every shot from Saturday to the end.
Did you really?
A lot of it, yeah.
You were a total couch potato.
Well, listen.
You had to be.
Well, the last 2 weekends it was on the road, and the next 2 weekends are going to be on the road, looks like for me too. So I was like, I just kind of want to chill. And it's the Masters. You got to, like the best golf weekend of the year. Had to watch it, yeah.
And it ended in sudden death, which is also very cool.
Rory and Bryson to start the day, and then Rory finally winning it. It was a great watch, for sure.
Good stuff. All right. Hey, we got a great show laid on for you. I mean, literally no guests today because I just felt like I had content I wanted to unpack in more detail. I want to spend some time working my way through it without feeling like I'm rushed at all. So we're gonna just take these topics one at a time. We call it the Triple Dipper. Hit it, man.
The Triple Dipper. 3 stories you've got to know.
That's right, the Triple Dipper, 3 stories, 3 themes, if you will. Yep, just follow along. Number 1, out the gate, Holy Week. It is. It's Holy Week. Started yesterday. Holy Week. And the interesting dynamic is you're seeing the White House declare it as Holy Week for the White House itself and calling upon people to a resurgence in faith in Jesus Christ. I mean, that's... Wow, what a turn from last year. I'll talk more about that in a minute, but we're going to talk about it in detail as part of the first Dipper. Holy Week, number 1 on the Triple Dipper. Number 2, military-minded. Y'all, listen. Things are changing by the day. By the way, I will say this. I was down at Fort Benning, Georgia this past weekend. Oh, man, it was just gorgeous. We were down there for the big Easter egg hunt at the commanding general's house there on the center of Fort Benning. And the fact that it's just called Fort Benning again just got all over me. It's just good. It's just goodness. I like it. Military-minded. I'm going to tell you about a lot of things that are developing. Y'all stay tuned for that. Number 2 on the Triple Dipper, military-minded. Number 3, fool around and find out. Well, we got a bunch of them. We got a bunch of folks out there like, he's not serious. He ain't going to do nothing. We'll keep doing our DEI stuff. We'll keep putting transgenders in girls' sports. We'll keep doing these things and those things that they said don't do. And guess what? Fool around, find out. We are watching right now as President Trump is turning off the tap on federal funds for prisons, for schools, for states in general, who just decide they want to just continue to go down the road they know they can't go down. Fool around and find out. That's number 3 on the Triple Dipper. All right, let me jump on into the Rightside Way opening monologue. And I'll just remind you guys that Stan McDonald, attorney Stan McDonald, is the sponsor daily of the Rightside Way monologue. A 30-year veteran in the practice of law. I will tell you more about Stan McDonald, the Rightside Way sponsor, in just a few minutes. All right, let me just say again, this is Holy Week, right? It is. It's Holy Week, a week that Christians the world over consider to be the most important in the dates that mark our faith. Beginning with Palm Sunday, moving through to Good Friday and Easter Sunday, Resurrection Sunday. This week marks the legacy that Christians share in knowing that our God saw fit to make the ultimate sacrifice by sending his son Jesus to take our place. I believe that. I do, with all my heart. And I'm not perfect, but I am forgiven. And what's so refreshing to me, what's so refreshing overall, is to know that my president apparently feels the same way. Yesterday, President Trump issued a proclamation. He announced that Holy Week at the White House will, in fact, be holy. A week filled with prayer, worship, remembrance, and humble celebration right there in our nation's capital. And when I heard it, I could not help but think of the book of Joshua. Joshua had taken the place of Moses, which were big shoes to fill, man. But Joshua had taken the place of Moses, no small thing, and the Israelites were doing their usual cycle of worshiping pagan idols versus worshiping the God that brought them out of Egypt. And in chapter 24, Joshua stood before the people, and he didn't berate them, he didn't belittle them. He just reminded them who they were and who their God was. And he reminded them how much the Lord had carried them through, and then he led them. In verse 15, Joshua boldly said to the people that he was appointed to lead that they could follow the other little g gods if they wanted to, but, quote, as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord. It was leadership and faith, and it drew people back to the Lord. And I'm glad to see that's the same tone that we're getting right now from our current White House. That as for Donald Trump and his team at our White House, they will serve the Lord. It was just last year, if you think about it, it was just last year that former President Joe Biden decided that Easter Sunday was to be declared the Transgender Day of Visibility. Well, now, I don't know if that proclamation was signed with auto pen or not, but the fact is it sent shockwaves through the country. In one fell swoop, the Biden White House decided to spend the holiest of holy days worshiping idols, praising the created instead of the creator. You may also remember one of those too weird to be true, but yet it is kind of moments when Kamala Harris, just a few months ago, dissed on Christians everywhere at one of her political rallies. There was a young man there who yelled out, "Jesus is Lord." And she got that smarmy, "I'm about to school you" look on her face, and she said, "Oh, I think you came to the wrong rally." And while the audience laughed and jeered at the young man, she felt empowered by her ill-timed, misguided secular sense of humor. She said, "I think you meant to go to the smaller rally down the street," meaning Trump. The audience howled and guffawed and mocked, and she looked so proud. And then reality began to set in as it began to be reported nationwide, and she had so glibly mocked a man for shouting Jesus is Lord and implied that the message was better suited to the Trump-Vance rally across town. In one fell swoop, Kamala Harris told Christian voters that their faith-based political views were not welcome in her camp. Christians everywhere took note. Christians everywhere took note of what was going on in our White House, what was going on in their campaigns, and we voted for something different. So here's my question for you, though. Can we mix faith and politics? Can we? Can we mix faith and politics? It's a fair question. But Phil, what about separation of church and state? What about it? What about it? There's a First Amendment that affords every citizen the right to freedom of religion. Public officials are citizens too, right? My salvation is not based on my works. I don't earn my way to heaven, but yet the Bible does tell me that faith without works is dead, so therefore I must show my faith to others as proof of it. Well, how about this? Donald Trump claims to be a man of faith. He says he's always known of God and then believed in God and then became more faithful with God as he got later in life. But then he also says that when he was able to survive the assassination attempt in Butler, Pennsylvania, that he had a life-changing moment, and he knows that God spared him, and his faith dramatically increased. Look, some years ago when I was in the state Senate, a bill came up that dealt with pro-life issues. I don't remember which one it was in particular. There were several pro-life bills that I carried or co-sponsored, but I do remember the opposition on this one. There was one lady in particular who was absolutely spiteful. I mean, just like grossly obnoxious. Her vitriol against the pro-life measures always came across as being mean-spirited personal attacks. She was an absolutely bitter person, and it showed. On one occasion, I was accused of doing the most heinous thing by her, the most unforgivable. I was accused of letting my faith mix with my politics. Say it ain't so, Phil. You really didn't act like a Christian in the political realm, did you? Well, I hope I did. You see, when I got elected to represent the Senate District 10, I was not elected to be less than who I am. I ran as a conservative, I ran as a patriot, and I ran as an unabashed believer in Christ. Why would I leave that at home? Because you see, if my faith is the most important thing to me, and it makes me who and what I am, then how could I possibly not take it with me into politics? So of course I took it into politics. I'd be a hypocrite if I didn't. The truth is, whether it be me running for the Alabama State Senate or Donald Trump running for the presidency in D.C., the truth is we had better mix our faith with politics. And we voters had better pray about our vote. And we better mix our faith-based values and traditions and principles with our politics, because if we don't take those positions of faith in the public square, then somebody else will just take the opposite into the public square. Like Joe Biden, who declares it the Transgender Day of Visibility. And next thing we know, we got transgenders exposing themselves on the White House lawn thinking it's all cute for a photo op for their Instagram account. Look, there's an amazing story that I love in Scripture. It's in 2 Kings 22 and 23. It's worth the read. You couldn't make a movie better than this. A boy named Josiah became the king. He was only 8 years old when he became the king, and his father before him had been the king and done a horrible job. And the nation of Israel was in spiritual decay. So much so that as he got a bit older and he was in his 20s, the most holy site, the Temple of Jerusalem, was filled up with idols and pagan worship and male prostitutes, believe it or not. And on a purely secular basis, King Josiah, now a young man, decided he was going to repair the temple because it was falling apart. So in the course of doing so, though, the workers in this passage found what they simply called a book. That's it, just a book. And they brought it to the king, and he didn't know what it was either. But then he began to read it, and he realized that he was holding the Torah, the Bible, if you will. The nation of Israel had fallen so far from grace that the king himself didn't even know what the Bible was. But once he read it, wow! I mean, he gathered all the people and he read it to them personally. And then he tore down the idols. And then he pledged to lead them in godly fashion. He called on them to celebrate their own Holy Week, Passover, and it says that the people responded overwhelmingly and followed his leadership. At the end of that story, when Josiah finally passed away, it says in 2 Kings 23, verse 25, it says that there was never a king before him nor after him who turned to the Lord as he did. Think about having that for a eulogy. In all the Bible, filled with names like Moses and Isaiah and Abraham and David and more, nobody apparently was a leader like this guy named Josiah, who stood up in front of his own people and challenged them to serve the God that they had forgotten about. Dr. Ben Carson spoke last fall at the Alabama Policy Institute dinner, and he did a wonderful job. I had a great time being there. At one point, he said something I thought was profound, and so I made a note so I wouldn't forget it. He said this, speaking about faith, Carson said, quote, "It is said that there are two things we should never talk about in public, politics and religion." And then he said, but those are the two things we must talk about because those are where we are being attacked. And he's so right. But I'll go one step further. Not only should we talk about those two things, but I believe that we absolutely 100% unequivocally should talk about them together. Christians need to care about who's elected to make and enforce the laws that govern our country. Christians need to not only care about who's elected, but Christians also need to vote their faith, run for office, seek the opportunity to carry their faith into the public square. I mean, it's really simple. Either we as Christians speak out about our faith, or those who don't believe like we do will speak out about their faith or lack thereof. I'd rather it be us than them. And I'll take it another step further. Good stewardship of that which we've been entrusted is not only sought, it is expected. What will we do with this country that we've been given? Will we as Christians take bold action and grow it and shepherd it and be good stewards of it? Or are we going to sit on our haunches and just wait to see what happens? I don't want to be that guy. I don't want to be the one who in the end realizes I had an opportunity to do something to advance this great nation in a way that increases our capabilities, enhances our strengths, protects life, liberty, and property, and, oh, by the way, promotes a belief in an almighty God who loves me in spite of myself. But instead, I just did nothing. I don't want to be that guy. You don't either. Listen, our faith is not based on works. I believe that. I believe that my salvation is assured because I have a personal relationship with Jesus Christ. No other way. But there are two parts to being a Christian. There's making him Savior, and there's making him Lord of our lives. A friend of mine said last night in my church small group, he said, my salvation was instant, but my sanctification takes a lifetime. He was right. He was right in that we have a lifetime of work to do, and as Christians, that does not mean doing it everywhere except in politics. You see, sometimes Christians need to be busy being Christians. Not in a braggadocious, ostentatious way, but in a real and practical way. So Christians, listen to me. Yeah, it's Holy Week. And yes, Our president just called on us to recall our Holy Week. Faith and politics, they go together like a hand in a glove. If you sit it out because it's politics, then you're wrong. Get up, get busy, and be political. Put your faith out there in the public square. Faith and politics, they do go well together. And that's a wrap for the Right Side Way. Well, that one might draw a comment or three, but I'm going to be honest with you, I believe it with all my heart. Christians should not stop practicing their faith just because they go into the public square. They should not. In fact, if anything, I believe that we are called to do just the opposite. Take it everywhere you can. Go in every place you can. And that includes politics. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just covering down. I lost my train of thought. That's what I get for looking over and reading the social media while I'm talking out loud.
You got to focus.
Apparently, my ability to multitask has been the switch flipped somehow. Pulling pins on truth grenades. How about that one? Very short amount of time. I ran long on that monologue, but it was worth it. I needed to run long on that one. Holy Week. Praise God. Hey, by the way, attorney Stan McDonald, I always tell you, he is the sponsor daily of the Right Side Way monologue. Stan McDonald, he's a law firm partner at Wilmer and Lee up in Huntsville. He's a 30-year veteran in the practice of law. And listen, not only is Stan the kind of guy who can just do an amazing job advocating for and fighting for your legal needs, but I happen to know for a fact, I know him personally, that Stan McDonald has been in the mix, like in the fray, fighting for the causes and the politics and the policies that right side ruffians care about. He's an OG ruffian from way back. He is also the guy who can literally represent his clients in thousands of real estate transactions. He can stand up for you in local, state, and federal court. I like to say if Stan McDonald is on your side, my gosh, y'all, you would have no greater friend. And oh, by the way, your adversaries would have no greater foe. So that being said, attorney Stan McDonald, law firm Wilmer and Lee, I'm going to tell you how to reach him right now. You ready? Here's his phone number. Stan McDonald, 256-479-3020. That's Stan McDonald, 256-479-3020. Tell him you heard about it on Right Side Radio. And oh, by the way, no representation made of the quality legal service be performed with great quality legal service for all the lawyers or something like that. Phil Williams, Right Side Radio. We'll be right back. Hey, all you Rightside ruffians out there, you are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid conservative and just plain right. Covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. Goes from like Huntsville back over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back over to Gadsden. I'm talking about all the way down to that loveliest little village on the plains called Auburn. And yes, stretching across to the beautiful Fort Benning, Georgia, Fort Benning. And then there's big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi all thrown in just for good measure. All right, text lines are open, 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Text it or call it, same number for both. Before I go any further, I'm going to confirm with JP. I guess I'll confirm what we're talking out loud. The promo code ended yesterday, correct?
Correct.
All right, first of all, I want to thank all of y'all who just went hog wild on our merchandise store. I mean, Natalie was like licking and stamping, man. She was she was stepping and fetching, getting all that stuff to the post office. But I know that some of y'all already got your shirts. We sold a whole, but I think we sold probably half of our stock of the new flag shirts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they went flying off the shelves.
They did, golly. And then the coffee mugs, and I tell you, the other one was we had a big order of those highball glasses.
Yep.
The bulletproof influence glasses that have the bin shot construction that have the 308 round embedded in the glass. We sold a chunk of those later in the week. So anyway, thank all of y'all. It's still there. The tariff merchandise promo code has expired, but nonetheless, the merch store is still up and running, and we'll be restocking the shelves even more sometime soon. But get your stuff while you can at rightsidemedia.org. All right, let me get some text messages. John from Huntsville says, Phil, fantastic monologue. Also, did you hear about the wild helicopter crash in the Hudson River? I did, absolutely. So, by the way, JP, I watched most of the Masters. I was disappointed in the end that Justin Rose didn't prevail after that massive comeback into a sudden death playoff, and McIlroy hit some very poor shots on the back nine.
He did. He almost let it slip, but not this time. He choked too many times in the past. He had to get this one.
Wait, who was it in the final? It was McIlroy and who?
McIlroy and Rose in the playoffs, yes.
Yeah, didn't he choked on a short putt, didn't he?
Well, so he was leading up until Saturday and then had an awful Saturday, came back Sunday. His putt was pretty long, though. So, yeah, he choked the lead after the first two rounds, though. So,
well, all I know is McIlroy was humble and blown away.
Oh, I mean, somebody had great quotes like that. That is the face of a man who had the world lifted off of his shoulders. Because for 11 years, it was he can't win the Masters, and the career Grand Slam hanging over his head.
Who's got the green jacket now?
Yeah, so they can all shut up now.
That's nice. That's good stuff. Jeff from Indiana says, hey, Phil, I believe the leftist faith is just as strong as yours, only they worship Satan instead of God. There you go. He said, Satan dwells in the minds of fools, and he has a very strong following in the liberal community. They don't even realize it, because I can think of nothing more that Satan would love than the acts that they do, hating Christians, hating Jews, common sense, and anything else that would make this world a better place. He says, by the way, do you think the Easter Bunny will come try to shut Trump up this year? Do you remember that last year during the Easter egg roll?
I did, yes.
The big bunny comes over. Biden is having himself a moment where he's looking a little bit glazed, and he's talking to kids. And I think he was about to get a little too familiar, and the bunny comes over and goes, Mr. President, come right over here. The Easter Bunny is like, who put the Easter Bunny in the keep him going routine?
Yeah, the Easter Bunny was trained.
I'm saying. He's a handler. The Easter Bunny was his handler that day.
It was just Anthony Blinken in an Easter Bunny costume.
Allie from Athens says, this was a perfect Holy Week reminder of who we are, why we are, what we are, and who has gone the way before us. He said, it will either take heat and prosper or ignore precedent and perish. Excellent monologue, sir. Thank you, my friend Allie. You have a way with words as always. TL from Huntsville says, amen, Pastor Phil. He said, during the Biden administration, Trump said, quote, America is a nation of believers, dreamers, and strivers that is being led by a group of censors and critics and cynics. Wow. I did not recall that tweet. I mean, that quote. he said TL says we can celebrate this Holy Week knowing that your vote matters and that faith-based voting makes a difference. And yes, it does. And I really think, there was a lot of talk. I even pulled the study this morning looking at it. There was a lot of talk that Christians were going to sit out that last election in broad swath, like kind of scary. I even did I did a monologue in November about a study that said that 38% of all Christians said they were probably going to just sit this one out because they didn't know what to do because politics was not their bag. And I thought that's galling. And you don't have to know. Here's the thing. I talk about politics in the public square. If you're a voter, if I'm not talking about just even those who run, or just as a voter, as a Christian, the point that was made in that monologue I did back last year was that when Christians vote, if they don't understand politics, that's okay. They can understand their faith. You can understand your faith and you can look and apply scripture to what you see. If you're still confused, then you can break it down to constitutional liberties, which, by the way, are very godly and scriptural and factual. And you can look at it in terms of life, limb, and property. Which candidate, if you're unsure of anything else, look at it in terms of the constitutional protections for life and liberty and property, and decide for yourself which candidate does the best job of promoting life, liberty, and property. If nothing else, if you're not sure, you can always go with that, and you're going to find your way forward.
It drove me nuts too in Christians because Trump wasn't this golly so just nice, and I don't want to offend anybody Christian. Yeah. Christians were bashing other Christians for voting for him because he was, I guess, rough around the edges and had a bad past. But look at I look at actions more than words, and like he's pro-life, and like you said, life, liberty, and property. Like his whole administration, you're not just voting for Trump either. His whole administration is people that pray before talking to the press. They pray before cabinet meetings. So I find it funny that people voted for a party that is pro-choice and very much against Christian ideologies because Trump is rough around the edges, and you know that's a whole nother rabbit hole. But yes, the fact that Christians were thinking about not even voting at all, it's like you have to participate in politics. I think as a Christian, you have an obligation to.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, and then if you look at it, even still, I get it. Trump can be a little coarse sometimes. Mm-hmm. You wonder why he's so bombastic sometimes. Guess what? So am I.
Yeah.
I mean, I've got that locker room mentality a lot of times, mm-hmm. and I've lived in a barracks. I know what it's like to have that kind of rough humor, and I also know that there's a time and a place for it. But the reality is, you look at what we just went, and I quoted it in my monologue. Look at what we just went through. We came real close to the candidate of choice being either A, Joe Biden, who had declared Easter the day of transgender visibility, or B, Kamala Harris, who mocked a kid for yelling Jesus is Lord at her rally.
Yeah.
And was pro-abortion, both of them, super pro-abortion. Neither one of them good at the idea of promoting life, liberty, and property. And then you've got President Trump, who is all about helping preserve life. He's very pro-life. He's all about preserving liberties, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, all of it, the whole Bill of Rights. And then you've also got him being all about the idea of property, and I can kind of gainfully make that a little bit bigger. He's for people having an opportunity to succeed and to gain and to grow and not constantly have the government telling you what to do.
That Transgender Day visibility, by the way, was very intentional on Easter.
It was absolutely intentional.
Like there is a spiritual battle going. That's why this isn't just politics.
And I'll go ahead and acknowledge that the argument they made when everybody began to push back on that was, it's been March 31st many years. It's always been March. It doesn't have to stay March 31st. It's not a friggin' national holiday. Mm. The president knew what he was doing when he did it. And what he could easily have said is, hey, gay crowd, if you don't mind, what I'm going to do is make you guys on Monday. Mm-hmm. All right? I really think that all I would do is draw unnecessary ire to you and to me. And by the way, I'm a practicing Catholic, so I'm going to go ahead and say Easter's Easter. You guys get to have, I don't know, April 1st, which will be April Fool's Day, so he probably didn't want to. But anyway, what I'm saying is he could have done that. You know why? Because he's the freaking president of the United States. But no, he didn't do it. And the idea that that was not intentional is ridiculous.
Yeah, it 100% was.
Absolutely intentional. And I agree with you. I think it was absolutely spiritual. Mm-hmm. I think there's a war in the heavenlies on a regular basis, and I think that was a classic example of the manifestation of the war in the heavenlies. You can quote me on that too, by the way. Mark from Red Bay says, and everyone thought it was Obama and Pelosi running Joe Biden. The whole time it was the Easter Bunny. Who would have thought? It was pretty crazy. Scott from Somerville says, Mark 16, 15, and 16. He's a great monologue. And then he quotes Mark 16, 15, and 16. He says, and he said unto them, go ye into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature. He that believeth and is baptized shall be saved, but he that believeth not shall be damned. Thank you, Scott. And then I've got someone saying, don't use my name. Hang on a second. Okay, it's completely unrelated. So let me look into what you're saying, and I appreciate the text. All right, listen, let me do this. If it's time for, well, I'll tell you what. When we come back from this break, go ahead and move towards the break. I know I'm about 45 seconds earlier than usual, but when I come back from this break, I'm going to kick off by reading you the actual presidential proclamation. He posted it on his social media for all the world to see. I'll read it out loud. You tell me how you feel about it. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Just making common sense like a superpower. Just a quick couple of more text messages before I jump in. Grace from Madison says, Biden's not a practicing Catholic. He's only a Christian by name. His actions speak louder than words. Well, I hear that, Grace, and I agree with you to some degree, but at the same time, I'll take someone's word about their faith, but I will say, you're right, their actions are what speaks. They will know we are Christians by our love, right? There's a bit of an action involved. It does not mean I'm saved, but it certainly shows the world how they can know. Jeff from Indiana again says, come on, Phil, Biden had no clue about Easter and the transgender day. He was just saying what he was told to say. That is probably true. The auto pen signed the proclamation. Jeremy from Madison said, Jesus overturned the sellers' tables in the temple. An act could be considered rude and rough around the edges. The disciples were armed in the garden. The Roman ear was cut off. Yep. I've always liked Peter. I think I identified with him a lot. But I tell you who I really got to where I liked more and more was Paul, who, of course, was after the fact. But if you look at Paul, my gosh, that guy. Anyway, all right, let's do this. Let me jump on in here. First, I think it's important that we know what all I'm talking about with regards to the Trump proclamation and what is happening. So last year, we had Easter. I mean, the whole thing got so corrupted. It really does remind me of the stories in Scripture you hear about, like, the temple becoming a place where madness took place. Think about it. You look at it and go, how does a nation become so depraved that the temple is where male prostitutes hang out, and the temple is where they put up pagan idols in God's temple? That's like, what? Well, I realize it's not a temple, and I'm not trying to portray the White House as a temple, but think of it as a place that is somewhat sacred in its ground, a place that has a bit of a hallowed esteem to it. And you had transgenders exposing themselves for photo ops on the grounds of the White House. You had rainbow flags being hung from the porticos. You had any number of transgender influencers skipping through the halls and filming Instagram influencer videos in the most maddening and cavalier manner, like they could care less about the decorum of our White House. And that went on that was like common practice for the longest time. For 4 years, our White House was just denigrated, like it was some kind of weird frat house. It was just unseemly. That being said, and listen, I got to say this too. I recognize it's still the place where people live and work. That doesn't matter. You live and work there on behalf of the people and voted there by the people. And to go in there and just co-opt it and trash it and make it something that it's not meant to be, it gave me the clearest example that I've seen of the scriptures that describe the temple becoming a place of ill repute. Think about it. You look at it and go, how does a nation get... We just watched it. We just watched it happen. But Donald Trump issued a proclamation yesterday. Talk about a change. And listen, I recognize there's non-Christians out there listening to this who may take offense. I don't care. Guess what? I'm sorry for you. And there's a cure for that too, by the way. You can have what I have. You can. Any one of you out there who's offended by the idea that I'm happy over the fact, or that millions of Americans are happy over the fact that the White House is back into a place of not only decorum, but of honoring the faith that our country was built on. And don't try and tell me it wasn't, because it was. If you're offended by that, the solution is give it a try. Consider it. Is it something for you? Maybe you might want to wonder why we're so happy. What is it that gives Christians that peace that surpasses all understanding that it talks about in Philippians 4? Why do we find joy when it makes no sense to have joy? It's not because of us. It's because of what we have. Donald Trump issued a proclamation yesterday. This is straight off of his social media. I hold it in my formerly calloused paratrooper hands. He says this, and I'm going to read the whole thing. He says, "This Holy Week, Christians around the world remember the crucifixion of God's only begotten Son, our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and on Easter Sunday, we celebrate his glorious resurrection and proclaim, as Christians have done for nearly 2,000 years, he is risen. Through the pain and sacrifice of Jesus on the cross, we saw God's boundless love and devotion to all humanity, and in that moment of his resurrection, history was forever changed with the promise of everlasting life. As we approach this joyous Easter Sunday, I want to wish Christians everywhere a happy and very blessed holiday. America is a nation of believers. We need God. We want God. And with his help, we will make our nation stronger, safer, greater, more prosperous, and more united than ever before. Thank you, and happy Easter, Donald J. Trump." Wow. Y'all listen. The fact that he can proclaim Jesus as Lord tells me pretty much everything I need to know. It doesn't say, hey, by the way, I'm perfect and I worship God. He doesn't say that because he's not. And you know what? He's humble enough to know that. But the reality is, you just saw a massive sea change. You just saw a massive, massive sea change. We went from watching our White House be the place of ill repute, like the temple of old, to being the place where they came in, overturned the money changers' tables, and put things back aright. And, you know, when Joshua said, "As for me and my house, we will serve the Lord," basically what Trump did said is, "As for me and this White House, we will serve the Lord." Now, there was a free will in there. In that same passage, Joshua 24, verse 15, Joshua gave the people a choice. He said, "Worship that which you believe is best in your own eyes. But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." That's exactly what Trump's doing. He's not saying, you got to believe like I believe. He's just saying, to all Christians everywhere, happy Easter. Jesus is Lord.
And I'll just say, too, to the people who are the freedom of religion or freedom from religion crowd that want to act like our nation wasn't built on that. I mean, what's that famous portrait of George Washington kneeling and praying in the forest before battle?
Yeah.
Like, our founding fathers were thoroughbred Christians, and the freedom of religion, you know, the separation of church and state or whatever, was to keep from imposing different Christian denominations. So it's not like it was freedom from Christianity. It was the other way around.
Yeah.
So it's going back to our roots as America.
Perfect. Yeah. The establishment of religion is a whole lot different than just allowing it. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We got more. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama and Tennessee syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national covering down on all the issues. And oh yeah, like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to hour number 2 already. Where'd hour number 1 go? What just happened? What did you do with my first hour, JP?
I don't know, but talk about something powerful like we did. It goes by.
Yeah, well, I'm still on it, brother. So let me do this. By the way, I just feel like I think we need to. There's right now, there are people out there who are hearing that Trump declared this will actually be a holy week at the White House, who are themselves becoming panicans. I'm sorry, I needed that.
I didn't have it queued up and ready. You caught me by surprise.
All right, so I got a piece here from Politico. Phil, did you go to Politico? I did. I go to these places, so you don't have to. Holy Week. Yeah. This is last year. March 30th of 2024. Politico, in defense of the Biden administration, sends out its response to the ire of the Christian world for daring to question why Easter should not also be Transgender Visibility Day. The headline was, Sunday marks both Easter and the Transgender Day of Visibility, cue the culture war. Okay. Let me ask you this first of all. Why do we need a Transgender Day of Visibility?
I don't know. Apparently,
what the frick is that?
Apparently they're invisible, so they need a visibility day, I guess.
Well, they've been pretty visible the last 4 years.
They've been overly visible.
It's hard to miss all the RuPaul wannabes.
Yeah.
that do Story Hour and the people that expose themselves for their Instagram accounts on the White House lawn and just the madness.
Shirtless transgender girls on the White House lawn too.
What?
On that same day you're talking about, there were shirtless
That's what I'm
transgender
talking
girls.
about. Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
That they're just transgenders.
Yeah.
They're dudes.
Mm-hmm.
Dudes with breasts. That's
Yep.
all they were. Ugh. Anyway, Sunday marks both Easter and the Transgender Day of Visibility, the holiday nobody asked for. The culture wars have reached Easter, said Politico back then. President Joe Biden on Friday issued a proclamation recognizing March 31st as the Transgender Day of Visibility, just as he has every day since he's been in office. You can hear the whine as they're writing it. Everybody always does it, man. I don't know what the problem is. Why has everybody got a beef with this? Anyway, conservatives responded furiously, accusing the president, who is Catholic, of attempting to stifle Christian values. Yeah? What's your point? By highlighting the event during an important religious holiday. He knew exactly what. Yeah, I got news. Would he have done it during Ramadan? No, he would not. By the way, they've already got, I'm going to find it during the next break. They've already got, now that I say this, I better do it during the next break. But
I can look it up right now if you want me to.
Well, how many different LGBTQ days of recognition there are? There's an entire Pride Month. There's the Transgender Day of Visibility. And it goes on and on and on. House leadership voiced their outrage, as did the Trump campaign, demanding an apology from the White House. The White House pushed back, saying that, quote, as a Christian who celebrates Easter with his family, President Biden stands for bringing people together and upholding the dignity and freedoms of every American. No, he doesn't. No, he doesn't. Let me make a point. You do not lift up one group by watering them down so that another group feels like they got something from that group. That's not the way it works. You're not lifting people up by tearing down what they believe in. You're not lifting people up and declaring you're upholding the dignity and freedoms of every American by denigrating one or making them feel slighted at the very least so that you can raise up the other one who is in direct contravention to the thing that the other group believes. You know what? Here's the deal. Joe Biden and all of his minions who worked in that White House, all the activists who had access to the White House auto pen, you had 365 days to choose from. There was nothing that mandated, there was no lunar schedule that required that the Transgender Day of Acceptance last year had to be on the same day as Easter. Easter, by the way, had thousands and thousands of years of the day in which it will fall. Transgender Day of Visibility is brand spanking new, and you knew exactly what you're doing. Here's a quote for you. "It is common," said Politico, "it is common for there to be multiple proclamations for the same date. Easter Sunday will also be Cesar Chavez Day." Who the frick? Cesar Chavez Day? That didn't even make the headlines. Well, why are they? Politico is such a waste of time sometimes. Anyway, White House spokesperson Andrew Bates back then added, quote, "It's unsurprising that politicians are seeking to divide and weaken our country with cruel, hateful, and dishonest rhetoric. President Biden will never abuse his faith for political purposes or for profit." What is he talking about? What political purposes? Well, I got news. The only thing you did was politics. That's why you had a Transgender Day of Visibility. You were virtue signaling your left-wing politics. And then the for-profit thing, I don't even know. Who knows? Of course, the Human Rights Campaign pushed back. Of course they did. That's their thing. That's how they make. There's their for-profit. A prominent LGBTQ plus civil rights group, the Human Rights Campaign, pushed back in a post to X saying, "Not only would Trump's policies drag us back in time, apparently he doesn't know how the calendar works." I don't know what that means. I have no idea. Did you find it?
So there are 35 plus LGBTQ plus awareness days and weeks
What?
observed throughout the year.
35?
35 plus at least is what this says.
Read off a few of them.
Okay, so February, there's Aromantic Spectrum Awareness Week.
Stop.
March 31st, Transgender Day of Visibility, and Bisexual Health Awareness Month is March. April is International Asexuality Day, April 6th, and International Lesbian Visibility Day is April 26th. May, you got International Day Against Homophobia, Biphobia, Transphobia, May 17th. May 19th, Agender Pride Day. Shall I continue?
Seems
like
Is it
there's
wearing
one-
you out already?
It seems like there's one in there. It's a long list here. Yeah. Pansexual Panromantic Visibility Day, May 24th.
Pansexual Panromantic Day.
Yeah. Pride Month, June, obviously. So
Here's an idea. Why don't we just make them visible all on one day? I mean, have you seen how long the LGBTQ acronym is now?
it's infinite because they even claim there may be more out there we
That's
haven't
why there's a
discovered
plus
yet.
sign on the end,
Yeah.
because just in case you find a new one.
Yes. Even if there's one out there that they aren't aware of.
Okay, I get the point. So 35 plus. Where'd you find that? What was the source?
This is this is the AI overview on Google, so it pulled from a bunch of different sources.
Woof.
Yeah.
Townhall.com has a piece that came out yesterday afternoon. Townhall.com. Back to the world of like conservatism here. Townhall.com says the single most pivotal moment in human history. By the way, I will agree with that. Regardless of whether or not you believe in Jesus Christ as your Lord and Savior, you cannot deny that he existed historically. So let me break that down. Here's an apologetic for you, which is just a fancy way of saying an explanation that defends. All right. It does not matter whether you believe the faith aspects of Jesus' existence. The fact is he existed. That's historical. It is not just the Bible that talks about Jesus. There are Greek and Roman texts. There are archaeological digs. There are any number of things that are both cultural, political, historical, that relate back to his time that conclude that he existed. He was real. He walked the earth. He lived and he died. It is known. That being said, now you just have to decide what you're going to do with it. He existed. You must decide what you make of his existence. Now, having said that, you cannot deny that the life and times of Jesus Christ were the pivotal change in human history. It is a place from which we began to measure time. It is a place that established the church and created an entire sea change in cultures. It literally took whole sections of the world and transformed them. It became the thing that was the driving force in any number of things, both good and bad, on epic national, transnational scale. Jesus existed. He just did. And his existence was pivotal to human history. It was. Townhall.com article, again, referring back to it, says the people's house yeah, that's the White House, has featured most recently shirtless biological men identifying as women, flaunting themselves on sacred ground and drawing attention not to God but to themselves. The most visible declaration from the Biden White House on Easter 2024 was not, "He is risen," but rather, "Look at me." Holy Week, though, has reclaimed its dignity. Gone are the cheap theatrics of political agendas masquerading as progress. In their place is reverence in Scripture and prayer and humility. Here's an amazing quote for you. I love this quote. I'm going to read it verbatim. I wish I had written this myself. Townhall.com, Kevin McCullough wrote this. He said, "Instead of drag queens and narcissistic influencers, we're seeing solemn observance. Instead of the glorification of confusion and chaos, we're witnessing a national moment of reflection. Last year it was about exposed body parts. This year it's about exposed hearts." Wow. He said the message is clear. America's returning to God. And it's not just the events themselves. I mean, you can look at things like the other day, I even pointed it out. I saw it on TV. Caroline Leavitt, who is the press secretary for the White House, the video caught her praying with her staff before she walked out she was praying for wisdom and the right words before she walked out to stand in front of the nation and the press to answer questions. Wouldn't you rather have somebody that took it serious enough to where they actually not only knew the information and ingrained it so they could speak without reading a notebook, but they prayed about what they were going to say before they said it? And I'll say this too. I heard my pastor say one time, in the middle of a sermon, he just kind of stopped and he goes, "What if I'm wrong?" And the whole room kind of sat up and looked at him. He goes, "What if I'm wrong? What if it turns out, what if I die and there's no heaven?" And of course, I'm thinking, this is a weird sermon. He said, "If that happens, what have I lost?" He said, "Because right now I am an adherent to a faith that asks me to be faithful to my wife, to be loyal to my friends, to have a strong work ethic, to be a good steward of that which I'm placed in, to have kindness over viciousness, to have the ability to send a kind word and to care about people." And he went on and labeled all the things that Christianity stands for, and to pursue wisdom. And he basically said, so I believe that when I die, my eternal reward is going to be heaven. But I also believe that while I'm here on earth, the things that the Christian faith calls for are better for us in general anyway. Wouldn't you rather have a president whose press secretary prays before she walks out? That's my point. Consider the man at the center of the Easter, Jesus. He didn't rage, he didn't riot, he didn't retaliate. When mocked, he stayed silent. When tortured, he endured it. When crucified, he forgave. And that hope stands in stark contrast to the message we were given a year ago when the White House was preoccupied with celebrating delusion and division. Easter was stripped of its majesty by the White House last year. And he says, America is not perfect. We are still divided, still hurting, still wandering. But this Holy Week, there is a whisper calling us home. And maybe, he says, just maybe, if we return to the foot of the cross, like that thief did, we'll find what we've been missing all along: forgiveness, purpose, and real hope. Listen, when we get back, I'll finish this segment up by telling you about some of the things the Trump White House is actually going to be doing this week. I mean, like, they're actually making events this week. I would love to be up there for this. Hey, Mr. President, you got a seat? I'd like to be there. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Saving the world one soundbite at a time. Exclusive to Fox News is a list of the things that the White House is going to be doing for this Easter Holy Week. So, piece came out yesterday afternoon. The White House is gearing up for an extraordinary celebration for Holy Week ahead of Easter, with President Donald Trump participating in a number of events to celebrate and honor the holiday, quote, with the observance it deserves, end quote. By the way, if you may recall, Trump actually established the White House Faith Office. So this is not going to be the last time you're going to see faith in the White House, Christian faith. The office released a presser saying, "We will distribute a Holy Week proclamation, a special presidential video message, and host a pre-Easter dinner and a White House staff Easter service. It'll be a time of special prayer and worship at the White House to be shared with Americans celebrating the week leading up to Resurrection Sunday." And I'll go into more of it, but I will say this: the Easter dinner Wednesday evening, I would love to be there for that. The dinner will feature hymns from the Marine Corps Band, Christian opera by singer Charles Billingsley, prayers and remarks from President Trump, and on Thursday, the president will be hosting a worship service at the White House with Paula White, the Reverend Franklin Graham, Pastor Greg Laurie, and Pastor Jensen Franklin, with prayer, scripture, service, and communion. I mean, and an ensemble from Liberty University performing worship music. I mean, that's just, wow. Wow. But you know what's neat, though? I think the president is not just living out the faith he claims in his own right. He's also reflecting a trend that studies are showing is national. Pew Research, I got a piece came out from Daily Signal yesterday. Pew Research did a recent poll, and they say that Gen Z and millennials are showing an absolute increase in people in America who identify as Christians now. Barna actually released a study also showing that 66% of all U.S. adults say they've made a personal commitment to Christ, and it's still important in their life today, and that's a 12 percentage point increase since 2021. It made a note that those in their 20s and 30s, the Gen Zs and millennials, are the sharpest increase. We're seeing it also in Great Britain, where Britons who attend church have surged by 50% over the past 6 years.
Can I just say, as a Gen Zer, I 100% am seeing that too.
Are you? You think so?
Oh, yes. I'm seeing a lot, especially Gen Z guys, big uptick in Orthodox Christianity in particular, which is interesting. But yes, I'm very much seeing more and more outspokenness in people, because Gen Zers are looking for something above themselves to, get into. And so I've seen, especially amongst guys around my age, Orthodox Christianity's seen a major uptick.
That's huge. That's encouraging.
Yes.
It also points out, and it's not just in those who claim it. It's also there's an organization called the American Bible Society. One of their head guys was on a Tony Perkins podcast this past week, and he said that their studies indicate that there's been a 19% increase in people who claim to be reading their Bible on a regular basis. And not just men, but men who are millennials. So the millennial generation, again, is the one who's causing the spike, and that's nothing but huge. And I'm glad of it.
I think it's just a response to the constant, going against Christianity. It's almost like the younger generation is God speaking to the younger generation in that way, of opening their eyes a little bit, of, it's not just miserable being, there's something above yourself you can you can believe in. So I agree 100%.
And you look back at some of the great stories in Scripture. Josiah, he was in his 20s when he changed the nation, brought everybody back to God. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, coming up next, Military Minded. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Just covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all are talking about this show. Whew. Goes from Huntsville back over to Chattanooga. I'm talking about from Tuscaloosa back over to Gadsden. I'm talking about down to that lovely little village on the plains we call Auburn, straight across the border, then to now what has been recalled Fort Benning, Georgia. And then, yeah, big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi thrown in just for good measure. Got a few text messages before we change gears. Brian from Decatur says, one of the reasons we have a cesspool of immorality throughout our media and political offices is not that we have forgotten how to identify a woman. It's that a lot of people have forgotten what it is to be a real man. Wow, that's good. Next time someone wants to quiz a liberal, they need not ask them what a woman is, but to define a man. Dude, I need to put that on a bumper sticker. Mike from Coxey says, Satan himself is transformed to an angel of light. The book of 11 Corinthians tells us we shouldn't be surprised when they take over our hallowed places, but we need to be on our guard to kick them out when they get in. Yes, we do. And by the way, you can set up defenses too to try to keep them from coming in. Thanks very much, Mike. Jeff from Indiana again says, Phil, I suggest celebrating the LGBTQ2IA plus yada, yada, yada recognition days on leap year. At least that would cut it down to once every 4 years. Perfect. Marshall from Dubai says, Phil, the Transgender Day of Visibility? ? I think they make themselves very visible already. What, are they running around in stealth mode? Lockheed Martin and DARPA need to get a hold of that technology or witchcraft. Just saying. Keep up the good work. Listening to the show is really the brightest part of my day. Thank you, brother. And I think your text cut off too somewhere mid-word there, but I got the point and I appreciate it very much. Marshall, thank you. Have I got a hater here? Looks like I do. Michael from Sylacauga, who's not happy with this line of discussion, says, y'all don't understand the idea of personal liberty and responsibility. You're excited about telling people what they can't do, but you don't want the other side to have that power when they're in control. Issues like these are the reason those people end up getting in power. No, actually just the opposite, Michael. You are absolutely free to believe what you believe. My point is, I don't have to vote for it. And guess what? I didn't.
Nobody's holding a gun to your head, too.
There you go.
You know?
Yeah. And then he goes on, he says, we already have laws about driving under the influence. Enforce those laws. Michael, I'm starting to wonder what you're under the influence of. Then he says, does Rightside have any principled Christian libertarian voices? I would say yes, you're listening to one. Thank you very much, Michael. We're glad you're in the audience. By the way, being in this audience is the first step to recovery. Just saying. Is that a new slogan? Did I just come up with a new slogan?
Maybe we need a liner. Turn us up loud. Get some common sense in you.
Woo! Golly, we just came up with 2 of them. All right, let's switch gears, you guys. Let's switch gears for a minute. Okay, hang on a second. I got one more. Dwayne from Hartselle says, as far as mixing politics and religion, why not learn how to govern from the one who governs the universe? Perfect ending to the whole dipper. Thank you, Dwayne from Hartselle. Well said, sir. All right, let's jump on in. So this past weekend, I was down at Fort Benning. I'll be honest with you, having spent a lot of time there over the years, I mean, man, I can tell you right now, came and went. It was airborne school, then it was the infantry officer course, and then it was jump master school, and then it was ranger school, and then it was pathfinder school, and then it was my battalion commander pre-command course, and being inducted into the Order of St. Maurice as an infantry officer, and anyway. Listen, Fort Benning is a special place in my heart and mind. And when they named it Fort Moore, here's the thing. Liberals didn't know what they were messing with. Now, I talked to a young officer just recently who didn't really see the big deal. He's like, everybody loves Hal Moore. Well, yeah, I love Hal Moore. Lieutenant General Hal Moore was a legend. The Battle of the Idrang Valley, we were soldiers once and young. Listen, between Hal Moore and Command Sergeant Major Plumley, those 2 guys are legend in the infantry, and they should be. And I do not mind that they chose to honor Lieutenant General Hal Moore. It's the way they did it. It's the purge they went through, of taking something which no one thought was racist, declaring it racist, and then changing it simply because they needed to show the virtue signal of changing something as vaunted as a military post. And by the way, a military post where warfighters have been trained for over a century. Now, Having said all that, this past weekend I drove down. They had an amazing. By the way, if you've never been to Fort Benning, there's of course there's parts of it that are old and dated, and I get that, but there are. This is like when you think of a military installation, this is that. All right. You don't think of some of the other smaller posts. You don't think of some of the kind of training sites where you go and it's not that great. People don't want to go there, but they have to. Fort Benning is the place that has the giant airborne towers in the middle of it. You have ranger tabs on buildings. You have streets named after major battles like Marne and and all these other major battles or campaigns throughout history. You have fields like the Field of Four Chaplains. You have the Doughboy Stadium right smack in the middle. All these things are just like kind of on an epic scale. And too, when you go to Fort Benning, who all's been there. I mean, we're talking about people like, over time, George Patton, Dwight Eisenhower, Creighton Abrams. You can think of, any number of major generals who have been iconic and have changed history, have all been through Fort Benning, have lived there, have trained there. George Patton was stationed there back in the, 30s, I believe it was. So to go back this past week and for the first time be able to drive through the gate and see that it says Fort Benning, Georgia on the gate, it just did me right. Did me right. I believe they should absolutely go ahead and now honor Lieutenant General Hal Moore's memory by dedicating something major on the installation to him. They should. Like, for instance, the Maneuver Center. I don't know if they already have so if you're not familiar, the Maneuver Center, it's called the IMCO, the Maneuver Center of Excellence. Way back in the day when I was a young officer, we got trained at that same building, and it was a little dingy, and it was called Building 4. That's all they called it. Building 4. Where'd you get? You go to the schoolhouse? Yeah, man, Building 4. Now it's called the IMCO, the Maneuver Center of Excellence, and all of the infantry and armor officers in the entire United States Army go through there. What a great, since Hal Moore was an infantry officer who was part of 1st Cav, the cavalry division, you can fit infantry and armor in a sense underneath him. I say go ahead and name the IMCO the Lieutenant General Hal Moore Maneuver Center of Excellence. Just do it. Can I have some applause, please? I think that's worthy. All you out there, all you green suiters, all you folks who are veterans, especially those of y'all that are 1st Cav. I was 1st Cav in Baghdad, so I say go for it. Now, having said all that, there's a lot of change happening. It's not just like changing the names back. It's also like removing leadership and putting leadership in place. Did you see, by the way, JP, the colonel in Greenland who was relieved?
I did not.
You did not?
Mm-mm.
Okay, pray tell, where were you? I don't know how you missed the story.
Well,
I know, it was Masters weekend.
That's a good point.
So actually it happened, I think, late last week.
I may have seen it, but remind me.
A colonel who was in charge of. We have a very small installation there. It's called a space base mostly, and it's like a listening post / radar station, forward listening in Greenland. Vice President J.D. Vance went to Greenland 4 or 5 weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
Apparently, soon after he left, the colonel who's in charge of the Patufic Space Base is what it's named. She felt it necessary to send out an email to her subordinates taking issue with what the vice president had said about Greenland when he was there and Denmark, and claiming that he does not speak for us.
Yes, I think you brought that up last week, yes.
She lost her job.
Yeah, rightfully so.
Rightfully so. Somewhere down the line, senior officers began to believe they could say whatever they wanted to say and expect no repercussions. Apparently, it's say what you want to say as long as it's woke and there's no repercussions. Gone are the days. You may recall, and I just now I'm going off the top of my head, I've forgotten his name, and I'll think of it in a minute. The Marine Corps Lieutenant Colonel, who was apparently a dynamic combat leader during the time of COVID and the Afghanistan pullout, he went ahead and did a video and said, I realize I'm sacrificing my career by doing this, but I want to know where the accountability is for the Afghanistan withdrawal. Why is no one at the upper level being held accountable? And did he lose his job? Well, by God, he did. He did. He also knowingly did what he did, expecting to lose his job.
Was it Stuart Scheller?
Yes, that's him, Lieutenant Colonel Scheller. I feel like we're playing Jeopardy. What is Lieutenant Colonel Scheller? Yes. But this colonel in Greenland was surprised, and the left is now crying out, wait, you can't do that. Oh, yes, they can. You know why? Because she was a chucklehead. And if she's going to be a chucklehead on green suit time, guess what? You can take the green suit off and go to the house. And she lost her job. There's another one right now going around. I don't know much about it, and I really don't want to get too far ahead of the story because I think what's happening right now is some conservatives on social media are smelling blood, and they're going for it. But there's a female colonel in charge of a military installation at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. She's a garrison commander, and if you're not familiar, the military will have a garrison commander, meaning the person who's in charge of the maintenance and the not just the maintenance, but the installation itself. And then there's the unit commanders. All right. So the garrison commander at Fort McCoy is a colonel, a female colonel, and apparently she's got a pretty woke attitude, and she said a number of things on the record that are very DEI oriented. But there's also a question about whether she's refusing to put up Trump and J.D. Vance's picture and Pete Hegseth's picture in the command photos gallery. I don't know that that's true or not yet. We're going to find out. But all I'm saying is military mindedness, we are watching a change in the way things run. An absolute change. One of those is we just got a brand new Joint Chiefs chairman the other day. We'll come back from this break. I'll tell you who it is. All you guys out there in green suit land, veterans and defense contractors, just know this. You have a new Lieutenant General Dan Kane, who President Donald Trump just called out of retirement. I'll tell you more about it here momentarily. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid conservative, just plain right. Just pulling pins on truth grenades in here. That's what we're doing. Bulletproof influence. That's what I like to say. All right, so I'm in number 2 of the Triple Dipper, military-minded. So, yeah, there's a change going on. Yeah, we got some stuff happening. Yeah, the military is finding that it is back in, just like so much else, we're finding the military being given back its identity, if that makes sense. No longer is the military just a petri dish for social experimentation. That's where it's been, man. I'm telling you, it has. But we also now have a brand spanking new head general. So I went to military.com, and I feel like I have to do with military.com now what I do with things like Axios and Politico. Phil, did you go to military.com? I did. These guys are so friggin' liberal. Military.com, they should be ashamed of themselves.
The name is deceiving.
Well, yeah, I wanted to say militarywokeness.com.
Yes.
So here's the article, Dateline 2 days ago. Trump's unusual pick for joint chairman approved by the Senate in overnight vote. None of that was necessary.
Yeah.
The headline could have been General Dan Kane confirmed as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. But no, they got to make it Trump's unusual pick for Joint Chiefs chairman approved by Senate in overnight vote.
As in they tried to sneak it by. Yeah.
So unnecessary. All right, it's Lieutenant General Dan Kane. He was a 3-star. And let me read the opening paragraph verbatim. You ready? Lieutenant General Dan Kane, who President Trump plucked out of retirement to replace the black general he fired as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, has been confirmed by the Senate to become the nation's top general. My God. Could you hang your feelings more out on your sleeve?
The most passive-aggressive opening line.
No, thank you. Plucked out of retirement to replace the black general. You know what? The general who was there before, General Charles C.Q. Brown, was a general. Maybe C.Q. Brown wants to be referred to as the black general that Trump fired. But how about you let the guy go into retirement with his dignity, please? In the pre-dawn hours Friday morning, the Senate voted 60-25 to approve Kane to get a 4th star and become the next chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He, by the way, is the first chairman, this is interesting, who has never previously held a 4th star before he got the chairmanship job. Kane, during his confirmation hearings, vowed to remain apolitical and provide the president with candid military advice. And apparently his assurances were enough to gain the support of 16 Democrats. It was a bipartisan vote. Keep in mind, in the Senate, 60-25, that's an overwhelming majority. Simple majority is 51. They got 60-25. And there were 15 who weren't there to vote. All 25 no votes came from Democrats. Kane was nominated by Trump after the president fired General Charles C.Q. Brown without explanation. Here's your explanation. Everybody knows what it was. He was woke. Everybody knows it. He was on the record as having written about the idea of DEI being a necessary thing in the military. He presided over DEI. He implemented DEI. He extolled the virtues of DEI. He is no longer in his job. Why would you be surprised? General Kane, the new guy. General Kane was a fighter pilot. He was an F-16 Fighting Falcon pilot, and he held numerous assignments throughout the years. His call sign was Raisin, as in Raisin Kane.
It's that guy.
That guy.
I know that talking
Oh, that guy, Raisin Kane. Yeah, started off as an F-16 fighter pilot, had a 3-decade career. His last assignment before retiring was Associate Director for Military Affairs at the CIA. Kane got on Trump's radar in 2018 while serving as Deputy Commander of Special Operations Task Force fighting the Islamic State terrorist group, ISIS. By Trump's telling, Kane gave the president a plan to quickly defeat the group, and other military officers gave him more cautious advice. So what he's basically saying is he's a warfighter. He's a no fooling, don't pull your punches kind of general, and that's exactly what Trump wants. And apparently he's got no woke in his resume. So guess what? All you folks out there who work in the military environment, whether it be civilian or green suiters, you've got a brand spanking new Joint Chiefs chairman. He was brought out of retirement to earn a 4th star and to serve ably as your chairman. And I look forward to it. I can't wait to see what he's going to do.
Did Mark Milley get a new job as publisher at the military.com? That sounds like something he would write.
Give yourself some laughter for that, man. You deserve your own sound effect. That was well played. Well played, sir. Well played. All right, we get back from this break here in a minute. We're going to talk more about things that are happening militarily because it's important to take notice of things like, I don't know, what are we saying about stopping Iran from becoming nuclear? What are China, North Korea, and Russia doing cooperating with each other? What's the Pentagon going to do about finding out where the overly politicized officers resort or reside and then getting them out of the ranks? And then did we just enter into a new military agreement with Panama? I got all this stuff. And then, oh, by the way, I got more about just even right down to testing new ballistic missiles that you push off the ramp of an AC-130 Spectre gunship. I got stuff, man. I got a stack of stuff. It's all military minded. And some of you out there are going to want to hear it because it's just, number one, it's cool. And number two, it's going to fire you up. And then later on the show, by the way, we'll still have time for the fool around and find out segment. I'm telling you, there's some folks out there that can't read the room. And they are determined to go ahead and push back. And if we push back hard on Trump's DEI, maybe it'll be okay. No, not really. How about this? You fool around, you find out. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, hour number 3 on a Meatloaf Monday coming up. Y'all stay tuned. We will be right back.
You're listening live to Rightside Radio with Phil Williams. It's hard to go wrong when you're on the right side. Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right.
Alabama and Tennessee syndicated news talk leader, Rightside Radio. Phil Williams here live in the Rightside studios. Man, we got the local, the state, the national covering down on all the issues. And oh yeah, like the dude just said, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Well, welcome to hour number 3 on a Meatloaf Monday. How did we get to hour number 3 already? Blows my mind. Hour number 3 on a Meatloaf Monday, we're in Dipper number 2, military-minded. So I'm going to pull up an audio clip here. I'm going to call for audio 1 there, JP. So military-minded. I'm going to run the gambit of several things you might want to know that affect our U.S. military or our military capabilities or our military in terms of its policies. One of which you might want to keep track of. They are not a near-peer adversary, but Iran is still very much an issue on the world stage. Daily Wire has a piece that came out yesterday. Pete Hegseth, Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth, was on Maria Bartiromo's Sunday Morning Futures on Fox this weekend, discussing nuclear talks. Because if you're not aware, in the middle of everything else going on in the world, the Trump administration is actually at the table with Iran right now. Had their first meeting this past weekend. In my opinion, it's kind of flying under the radar, but this is a huge story because experts believe that Iran is extremely close to having the capability of producing nuclear weapon grade enriched uranium. In fact, the IAEA, the story I got from Daily Wire, the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, found in February of this year that Iran was like blowing past all the levels necessary for uranium in this nuclear deal that it used to have. Iran's uranium stockpile is now enriched to around 60%. Weapons grade uranium is roughly 90%. Iran's stockpile is also many times larger than the limit set in the deal. They have approximately 8,200 kilograms. They're well underway to basically blowing past what they said they would never have more than. All right, so what I'm saying is this: Iran's real close, and that's bad news because Iran is such a bad actor that what they don't do themselves, they'll find proxies to do for them. People are asking, why are we bombing the Houthis? I'll tell you why. It's part of the emasculation of Iran's capabilities. Because Iran sits in the back like a puppet master and pulls strings. Those who are willing to actually pull the triggers, those who are willing to be the puppets, are oftentimes just as dangerous as the ones who fuel them to do the shooting. So is Iran the source problem? Yes, they are. It doesn't mean you can ignore the fact that Houthis exist and they've been shooting at our ships, shooting at world commerce. We're having to divert ships completely away from the Suez Canal. It's become a thing that's impacting the world commerce on an epic scale. And so, yeah, the Trump administration has been like pounding the Houthis lately. Meanwhile, Hamas and Hezbollah, the other two Iran proxies, are being pounded by Israel. I think this is also being done in part in support of Israel. Keep in mind, people forget this, but the Houthis, despite the fact that they're all the way down in Yemen, actually fired drones across neighboring airspace into Israel. Luckily, they were shot down. But the Houthis have launched at... These are not just ragtag ragamuffins, like Black Hawk Down Somalis on the street. These are guys who have the capability of launching drone warfare against foreign nations hundreds of miles away. Trump is saying enough is enough. But Trump is also telling Iran enough is enough. Pete Hegseth was asked about Iran getting a nuke. Here's his comments on Maria Bartiromo's show Sunday morning.
We've had direct talks yesterday. They began in the past. It's been indirect talks with a mediator. But there's Steve Witkoff meeting with the foreign minister of Iran. What can you tell us?
Well, I can tell you that President Trump is dead serious on this issue. He's dead serious that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He's said that for 20 years. He's been consistent. That is clear. He's dead serious that he wants it done at the negotiating table. He wants it done peacefully.
Yeah.
And that's why he's going straight to these talks. He set that deadline. These were productive talks yesterday. I don't want to get ahead of our skis. Steve Witkoff does a fantastic job, but it was a good step, and they're gonna go at it again on Saturday. But he's also dead serious that if we can't figure this out at the negotiating table, then there are other options, to include my department, to ensure that Iran never has a nuclear bomb. We hope we never get there. We really do, Maria. But what we're doing with the Houthis and what we're doing in the region, we've shown a capability to go far, to go deep, and to go big. And again, we don't want to do that. But if we have to, we will, to prevent the nuclear bomb in Iran's hand.
That's pretty earnest talk right there. By the way, when he says my department, keep in mind that's the Department of Defense, all right? Special Envoy Steve Witkoff, who we mentioned, is the guy who's leading the talks. And the idea that we're sitting down at the table right now with Iranians to dialogue over the issue of curbing their nuclear aspirations, how much of that did you see in the Biden administration? You didn't. They would send pallets of cash, but they did not do anything to really engage the process of curtailing their efforts. So White House issued a statement, said Special Envoy Witkoff underscored to Dr. Aragachi, who is the Iranian envoy, that he had instructions from President Trump to resolve our two nations' differences through dialogue and diplomacy if possible. These issues are very complicated. Special Envoy Witkoff's direct communication today was a step forward in achieving a mutually beneficial outcome. The sides agreed to meet next Saturday. Iran actually issued a statement saying they had what was termed a very respectful meeting, I say a constructive meeting based on mutual respect. All right, that's huge. All you military folks, just know this. That's one to keep your eyes on. Here's another one to keep your eyes on. Story from military.com. Ah, geez, Phil, did you go to military.com? I did.
Twice in one show,
I don't know how to
really?
explain it. I don't know how to explain it. Every once in a while, you find a fact-based reporting. It's like, you know.
Blind nut gets a squirrel over once in a while.
That's exactly right. Military.com, Dateline Saturday. The top U.S. commander in the Pacific has now warned senators Thursday the military support of China and North Korea about the military support China and North Korea are giving to Russia in its war in Ukraine. So it's not just, and I find it interesting that China is. We know about North Korea sending troops. What's North Korea getting out of it, though? Think about it. North Korea does have nuclear capability. North Korea does constantly launch, ballistic missiles into the, Sea of Japan and that kind of thing, even over the peninsula of Japan. Unbelievable. Can you imagine launching missiles over like Alabama? I mean, that's anyway. But Admiral Samuel Papero, head of the U.S. Indo-Pacific Command, told the Senate Armed Services Committee that China has provided 70% of the machine tools and 90% of the legacy chips to Russia to help Moscow rebuild its war machine. Significant logistical support is what we're talking about here. China is giving significant technological and logistical support to Russia. North Korea is sending, he quotes, thousands, maybe hundreds of thousands of artillery shells, hundreds of short-range missiles, and the expectation is that Pyongyang, North Korea, will get air defense and surface-to-air missile support. Admiral Papero said, it's a transactional symbiosis where each state fulfills the other state's weakness to the benefits of the other states. Bottom line is this, y'all. North Korea is even sending soldiers to fight in Ukraine. So, strange bedfellows, weird axis. But right now we're looking at a definite axis of influence right now. China and Russia and North Korea actually working together to bolster each other's defense capabilities. And where one is weak, the other tries to plus up. Just weirdness. Stand by for more of that. I got one. I'm not sure I'm going to get to all the stuff I got in my stack. But I got one I'll take before the break. This just happened. I mean, did anybody know this was happening? Apparently not. But do we care? Yeah. A memorandum of understanding was signed last week. This will be Friday. ArmyRecognition.com. Defense News. The Ministry of Public Security of the Republic of Panama and the Department of Defense of the United States of America established a framework for cooperative security activities in Panama, formalizing mutual understandings related to the presence and operations of U.S. personnel and contractors in specific Panamanian installations. Look, I have long memories of Panama being a major U.S. military presence. It just was, defending the canal, and then of course they had the jungle school down there. We had major. My grandfather was a post commander at Corozal, I believe it was, in Panama back in the 50s. My mom talks about growing up in part in Panama because of that. We have been out of there for the most part since, well, I mean, we had to go in and take out Noriega, but we have been out of there pretty much since we saw Jimmy Carter give away the Panama Canal. So Jimmy Carter gave it away. It took a while. It didn't happen right away, but Carter's the one who signed the documents to give away the Panama Canal. We gave back all the installations, and the reality is we have not had a presence in that part. And now, guess what? All of a sudden we do. Why? Because China has been building influence. China's Belt and Road policies, their Belt and Road policies have been extending into Panama. They've been building infrastructure and doing all kinds of things to endear themselves to the Panamanian government. Well, the United States stepped in and said, hey, by golly, we got to change the flow here. You can't just let this happen. So the Memorandum of Understanding with the United States, it doesn't give us control or establish like foreign military bases, but it allows us to place people on those installations, unlike we've been doing in decades now. That's a huge deal. It was signed in Panama City just last week, and I don't think I can underscore enough how important it is that people recognize that what we're watching now is the Trump administration. They are at the table with Iran working on a nuclear-free Iran while they pound the Houthis in Yemen. Oh, by the way, keeping a close eye on the fact that China, North Korea, and Russia have eyes on Ukraine and are doing things actively to support each other in that regard. And then at the same time, we're looking southward and we're establishing new ground to work from in Panama. And this is an administration that has eyes out at all directions. We are not insular. We're not isolationist. We're not picking wars, but we're not shying from the fight either. It's a whole new day, you guys. A whole new day. We'll take a break. I'll come back and wrap this up. Y'all text it in or call it in if you want to. 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. Tell me how you feel about the military right now, especially those of y'all who work in that environment. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Y'all stay tuned. We'll be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Saving the world one soundbite at a time. Let me get a few text messages before I go too much further. Badger from Athens, checking in, says, rolling off the Arsenal, put the window down, and then suddenly y'all were in super stereo. Several of listening folks in line waiting to get out the gate. Roll on Rightside, he says. Loving that a lot. Thank you, all you ruffians who work out at Redstone. Proud to say that's been a huge part of my life, too, by the way. Stationed at Redstone out there when I was a kid. My dad was stationed there. My grandfather was stationed there. My grandfather was post commander there. Dad worked at BIMSCOM, the old Ballistic Missile Defense Systems Command. My granddad was project manager on Hawk Missile back in the day. Just cool. Anyway, thank you, all you Redstones. I appreciate you. Marshall from Dubai says, there's the rest of it. He popped in. Says, thanks for doing a fantastic show. Thanks, Marshall. Appreciate you. We have clarified, by the way, with Michael in Sylacauga. Michael, we welcome you back to the fold. He was taking issue with something we were saying, and we're like, we're not saying that. And it turns out he was on a station that we used to be on that we're no longer on. So... Anyway,
we've only been
all
on
good.
for 3 months.
He knows where to find us now.
Yes, we're all squared away.
That's right. Fritzy from Huntsville. Fritzy says, Colonel, heard about that garrison commander at Fort McCoy? I have. She's allegedly a progressive activist and refuses to hang official photos on her leadership board of POTUS and Vice POTUS and SecDef. Yeah, Fritzy, I did hear that. And here's the only thing I want to make sure of before I really spend too much time harping on her is... It's one thing to take a picture of I need to know that she's put out a statement saying she won't put up their pictures. I mean, if she doesn't have the pictures up there yet, or if that, for all I know, that photo was taken right after Biden left office, they didn't have a picture of a Trump yet. It could be. But that being said, I'm aware and I'm tracking, and I'll wait and see. Here's another thing, by the way. I'll get some more text messages in a minute. Y'all text them in if you want to. 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. I think we're entering an era of accountability, too. Some of it, though, by the way, is going to be accountability for things for which no one took accountability before. But it appears that, here's an example. Here's what brought me to this point. Number one, Secretary of Defense Hegseth has said that there will be a full-scale investigation surrounding the pullout from Afghanistan. And there should. There absolutely should. Nobody took accountability for that. Nobody. Everybody kept their job. Everybody rocked on. They talked about what a wonderful thing they did. It was the biggest airlift in American history. Yeah. Stop it.
Imagine that. One of the biggest failures in our military's history, and everybody kept their job.
Yeah, and I'll say this right now. It was not the boots on the ground that failed anybody.
Nope.
It was the suits in the Pentagon and the suits in the White House that failed everybody.
The suits in the Pentagon that asked those guys to clean up their bases for the Taliban, those are the ones that need to be fired.
That's exactly right. RedState.com, though, has a piece for one of those events that I'd almost really forgotten about until I was reminded. Red State, Dateline yesterday, 2 days ago. An investigation of the drone attack on the U.S. military base in Jordan called Tower 22. Remember that? Happened in January of last year. January 24, 3 U.S. service members died when a drone attack launched by Syrian-backed rebels hit Tower 22, where we have a 350-man garrison bunked. And this is, by the way, allegedly in an area that was hot enough to have security, but yet otherwise apparently not expected. What they're finding, though, the investigation is looking for I'm assuming they're finishing up a big 15-6. Those of y'all in the military know a 15-6 investigation is a part of how we investigate things that could lead to, UCMJ action. They're saying the defense of the installation was neglected. There were no drone defenses available on site at all. Drone activity, though, however, was known in the area, and they took no steps to counter it. Radar was not optimized for drones. There was indecision and negligence on site, and there were manning decisions about security, and there was an overall lack of seriousness. Okay, that's pretty full scale. That's like saying failure of leadership. That's accountability is what that is. I think we're looking at finally seeing accountability back in the military. Coming up, we're going to wrap up Meatloaf Monday. You guys stay tuned. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. We will be right back. You are listening to Rightside Radio, solid conservative, just plain right. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio, solid, conservative, and just plain right. Covering down on some major ground across the southeast U.S. of A. Y'all, I'm talking about this show. Woo! Goes from Huntsville back over to Chattanooga, and from Tuscaloosa back over to Gadsden. Down to that prettiest little village on the plain, loveliest little village on the plains we call Auburn, stretching across to what we now call again Fort Benning. And then big old patches of North Georgia and Mississippi all thrown in just for good measure. All right, I gotta remind you guys too, a lot going on here at Rightside Media, the parent company of Rightside Radio. So yeah, if you're listening right now and you're hearing the radio show, that's just one of our gigs, man. Rightside Radio is on daily, obviously 3 hours a day, multiple stations around the region, but that's just a part of what we do. We have a ton of podcasting going on. We've got the written word that goes out. We just got a new op-ed published this morning. It'll be out in other newspapers and news outlets around the nation, around the region very soon. Go to rightside.media.org. We got the latest edition of The Controversial Mom out today. We got the latest edition of Out of Right Field podcast with JP out today. Mine goes in the can tonight. After hours, I'll finish it up for the right philosophy. Listen, there's a ton of stuff going on.
Right Click with Birdman was out on Friday.
Right Click with Birdman came out on Friday. We should have another Liberty Minute with Jared Hudson coming out very soon. So all said and done, we got a lot of content. If you like what you hear on this radio show, picture having it on demand from a variety of sources. Here's my only ask. It's a small ask, but it's big to us. If you go to any one of these platforms, whether it be Rumble or Substack or YouTube or X or Facebook or whatever the case may be, and it has a like or a follow or a subscribe option, please do. Because you may not know this. First of all, it causes nothing for you, but the platforms give us more capabilities the more we have people engage it like that. So for our benefit as a growing media company, and our goal is to continue growing. And by the way, we have some exciting things in the works right now I can't wait to tell you guys about. But as we continue to grow, the only way for that to happen is for us to hit the next levels on the platforms where we host all the content, and then they allow us to continue doing more and better as we go. So yeah, hit like, subscribe, or follow. That'd be awesome. Back on this military thing, too, I'll wrap this up, and then I'll go back to text message. Text it in, call it in, 833-687-4448. That's 833-68-RIGHT. I got two stories here that I thought were important. Which one do I want to go with first? I'll do this one first. Townhall.com has a piece that talks a lot about, because you heard me mention so far, like Fritzy from Huntsville talked about the garrison commander at Fort McCoy, Wisconsin. Is there a wokeness going on? Is there a DEI hire? Yes, I have seen her picture. She does not look like she's meeting our military standards at all. There's that. But then you also have the Greenland colonel, the Space Force colonel who was relieved after openly insulting the vice president. There's an article here from Town Hall. It's by Kurt Schlichter. And if you're familiar with Kurt Schlichter, he's a former military guy himself. And he points out, he says, to be political on duty is a violation of our oath. It's a violation of our ethos as officers. It's got to be brutally crushed, he says. Even Barack Obama, he says, understood that when he canned General Stanley McChrystal. And I remember thinking what a loss that was. Now, since then, I've learned that Stanley McChrystal's got a little bit of a liberal streak in him. But in my opinion, he was one of the generals I looked at and thought I would love to follow that guy. McChrystal was fired, relieved of his duties in the combat zone, by the way, called back from Afghanistan and relieved of his duties by President Obama because an article was published about things he said off the record, he thought were off the record, to a Rolling Stone reporter. And he got canned. And I understood that. And I hated it. But it happened. But Kurt Schlichter points out we cannot have a functioning military that tolerates individuals putting their own personal prerogatives ahead of the mission. That's exactly what all this political posturing has done. It brings to mind the story he said of my continuing dispute with my command sergeant major when I commanded the Cav Squadron. We rarely disagreed on anything. My CSM was that guy whose picture is still scowling back at you, judging you when you look up the definition of NCO. But every time we had chow in the field, we had a confrontation. One of us would note that the last of the soldiers had eaten. The argument began. Sir, time for you to grab chow. After you, Sergeant Major. After you, Colonel. And we go back and forth. I get it. But what he's pointing out, though, is those are small fry disagreements. Where you don't disagree openly is when you start throwing around political commentary while you're on duty and expecting it to be okay. You know why? Because in our country, in our nation, by our Constitution, the military is subject to the command of the civilian authorities, and it should be. And now, I know what that means when I say that I did not like at all what was happening with Biden. I got to call it out. You know why? I'm retired. I have family members still on active duty. They did not. They did not. And they shouldn't. I wouldn't want them to. All I'm saying is this. The Pentagon is being urged to go on the offensive to get some of the wokeness out of our military. And part of that's going to be the things you've been seeing, like this colonel in Greenland at the Space Force, at the Patuxent Space Force Base, who was relieved of duty for daring to send out an email contradicting and actually calling out the Vice President of the United States. Never should have happened. She's gone. Last one I've got. You know why I got this one? Because I thought it was cool.
What's that?
This story right here. I pulled this off of The Aviationist. The Leidos Black Arrow successfully tested from an AC-130J Ghost Rider gunship. First of all, there's nothing in that headline that is not cool.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Yeah.
This is not a military.com headline.
No. What was that? The Ghost Rider gunship?
Yeah, the Black Arrow was successfully tested from an AC-130J Ghost Rider gunship. Are you familiar with the AC-130?
I think it's in Call of Duty, yes.
Have you ever seen the movie Transformers?
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
It's been a while, but yes.
At the beginning of the original Transformers, when the special ops team was fighting on the ground against that one Transformer bot, and they called in a Spectre gunship, and he the guy on the Air Force PJ, the black guy, he calls out, "Spooky 3-3, bring the rain." Well, that was a
Yes.
Spectre gunship.
Ah, okay.
I've watched Spectre in action, by the way, and it is unbelievable. Picture a C-130 4-prop aircraft. It's got a 105 howitzer and 2 Gatling guns sticking out the side of the plane. And when it flies over the target from 10,000 feet, it just pitches up to the side, and its targeting is like spot on to the point that it can chase a rabbit across the field with a 105. And this literally begins to just obliterate everything. It's like having cannons and Gatling guns raining from the stars. Okay. Like they needed some other armament. The AC-130J Black Arrow Small Cruise Missile. All right, anybody out there who's been on the ground and had Spectre flying overhead cover for you knows that there's nothing better than hearing the slight drone in the distance. And you know Spectre's on station.
I think I've heard that sound in many videos.
I've heard it in real life, and
Yeah.
it's good. But now they're testing a small cruise missile. It's a low-cost 200-pound adaptable delivery platform that gets pushed out the back. So the C-130 is a cargo craft originally, and it's got a ramp on the back where you can load cargo. Now it's where they load armaments in the AC-130. And they literally lower the ramp, and they just push this thing out the back. And it's a ballistic missile that can have guided flight, and put rounds on target in a big, big way. So anyway, I bring this to you only because it's freaking cool.
You know what? That's very valid.
And next break, you and I are going to have to watch the scene from Transformers when he calls Inspector. Bring the rain. All right. Let me get a few of these text messages. Shag Nasty the Atheist. What you got there, Shag Nasty? Shag Nasty says, as the kids say, AC 130 goes, Bert. Yes, it does. Shag Nasty, and so does the A10 Thunderbolt. A10 comes in, burp. This a giant burp. It's awesome.
The sound that sends chills down our enemy spines.
Oh, listen, you have no idea. By the way, I will say, now that I've said that, I do have one of my personal heirlooms on the shelf at my house. Next time you're there, look at it. Did I show it to you already? It's a brass 105 shell standing on the shelf under the lights in my study.
I don't think you showed me that, no.
And it was fired by an AC-130 Spectre gunship over the Tora Bora Mountains when they were hunting bin Laden in the early parts of the war in Afghanistan.
Wow.
So March 2002, Operation Anaconda. I am coming through a special ops base in Uzbekistan called K2, Karshi-Khanabad, and while I'm there, that's where Spectres were stationed, and they were on, and you could see all these Spectres lined up on the airstrip, all those cannons sticking out the sides of them, and I met a Spectre gunner, which is a cool job, and I said, dude, what's a guy got to do to score one of those expended shells? And he looks around, he goes, I'll go square you away. Next thing I know, he's bringing me one.
Wow.
And so I've got that thing sitting on a shelf right now. I was talking to Spectre crews down at Herbert Field when I was teaching a class down there, which is where they're really headquartered in real life. I am so chasing a rabbit right now. But I was talking to him and I said, hey, man, Operation Anaconda. And he goes, that's our legacy. I said, yes, it is. I've got one of the shell casings. He goes, no, how did you have that? And I told him the story. So anyway, personal heirloom, sits on the shelf. Wouldn't take money for it.
Can I just say AC-130 and an operation called Operation Anaconda? All of that is sick. All that is sick.
You can't get that in Call of Duty. It's real. Even Shag Nasty the Atheist knows that. All right, we're taking a break. We're coming right back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. You guys stay tuned. We will be right back. And we are back. Phil Williams, Rightside Radio. Solid, conservative, and just plain right. Making common sense like a superpower. Man, Mike from Grissom High School, class of '83, texting in. Mike, you're like triple teasing me right now. So this is a buddy from high school who's texted me in, and I happen to see in the background his 70 Hemi Cuda and his 69 Mach 1, which are my two favorite muscle cars in the world, while he's holding a brass 105 Air Force shell from a Spectre gunship. Dang, Mike. All right, listen, Mike, I'm just saying, when are we getting together? We need to do it. I need to, at the very least, need to visit your garage. Hey, let me go to the phones right now. Scott from Madison. Hey, Scott, how you doing, buddy?
How you doing today, sir?
I'm good, man. What's going on?
Hey, you were talking about C-130.
Yeah.
Early on in Fallujah, we had dismounted because we were mech at the time. We were dismounted. We were going through parts of Fallujah doing some Avon calling calls, knocking door to door.
Yeah.
And we had gotten, unfortunately, stuck in a sticky situation. And we had a Air Force combat controller with us, and we had spent a couple days there, just fighting off the bad guys. And he had called in air support, A-10s, danger close, danger close. And that sound that comes with them is just a sound of freedom.
Yeah, it is.
And there was hope. There was hope. And once the rain stopped and everything cleared up outside, there was nothing alive but us.
Wow.
It was unbelievable.
Yeah, A-10
But
close air
that's all I
support
wanted to
is I mean, that's a ground pounder's angel in the air right there, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Hey, man, appreciate your service. Semper Fi. Wow, that's good stuff. And I listen. I appreciate the fact that we've got so many in this audience who know the value of service, whether it be because of your families or you personally, or because you serve in the defense industry in some way. And I'll be honest with you, I'm counting civilians in that as well. So thank you for all of you who engage the process of what it means to defend this nation and our interest abroad. The grades are in. I'll get those real quick before it's too late because he's getting them in early. I don't know how to. What do we make of this? Is there no way to score points in the last 6 minutes of the show?
I'm about to say. There's like a cutoff.
He says, John from Huntsville says, JP gets an A+ for his fantastic performance, which means today's winner is obviously Phil with an A+ for a spectacular performance. Congratulations. Hope you have some delicious meatloaf tonight. Thank you, John. We appreciate you, man, as always. Stay in the fight, brother. Monty from Huntsville earlier referenced that drone attack last January, a local boy, Huntsville. Peyton Demos was the company commander of the unit that lost those three. He's torn up about it, as you can imagine. I did not know that. And, and I'm sorry to hear it. Monty, thanks for sharing that with me. Jeremy from Madison says, heck of a show, eating bacon-wrapped meatloaf. Bacon-wrapped meatloaf. That's like, Europeans can't even figure that out, man. Bacon-wrapped meatloaf.
Man.
That's America.
I've tried smoked meatloaf, and maybe next time on my list is to be bacon-wrapped meatloaf.
Bacon-wrapped meatloaf.
Man.
That's got goodness written all over it.
And that's a cardiologist's nightmare.
I don't care who you are. That's just good. It's all keto, though.
Yeah.
It's all keto.
Yeah.
John from Lexington, South Carolina says, if anything, I'm not sure what we're saying here. I think his voice texting wouldn't work out. John from Lexington, South Carolina says, if anything, something on the Fort McCoy commanders, I don't know what he's saying. They should harp on the Fort McCoy commander's body mass index. Now I see what he's saying. Okay. I got you. Yep. BMI looks a little off. Just saying. I'm saying. You are correct, sir. Very good. Brent from Athens, way earlier, says, I went to Fort Benning back in 2013 for paratrooper graduation. It was an amazing experience to see the jump towers and the training ground for the Rangers. I also went to the Infantry Museum while I was there. It was paradise for a historian like myself. It's a must-see for every American. Brent, it certainly is. And by the way, you don't have to have a military ID to go to the Infantry Museum. It's right outside the main gate, just off Victory Drive. It's absolutely world-class. And I tell you another one, especially you folks that are military, and I'm planning on taking my grandson, is the Ranger graduations they put on at when the whole class graduates at Ranger School. They do it now at Victory Pond, and they do what's called the Rangers in Action demonstration. Y'all, I went as an 05 to watch somebody subordinate to me graduate from Ranger School. And I got there, and I was ready to just drop everything and enlist as a buck private if they would let me go do that stuff again. It was awesome. Rangers in Action show, Victory Pond. You look it up. By the way, this past weekend was the best Ranger competition down at Benning. And if you want to see some studs that'll make you feel like the world is going to be a safer place with them in the uniform, best Ranger competition. I'm just saying. Steve from Tennessee, talking about Lieutenant General Moore and renaming of Fort Benning, says, Lieutenant General Moore was dead when they changed the name from Benning to Moore. He would not have wanted that particular name change. He was a thoughtful and humble leader who did not call attention to himself. Steve from Tennessee. Steve, thanks, man. If you knew him personally, I'd love to know that. That's a great testimony to his spirit. David from Buc-ee's said, Phil, let Jeff from Indiana know that sometimes they have trailers there as well, but I'm not sure I'd recommend it during bad weather. So apparently they have guys like dropping their load and then pulling their deadhead rigs into Buc-ee's.
Parked on the side of the interstate right in front of Buc-ee's, by the way.
Just running up off the median. We didn't hear from Jeff from Indiana today.
I think he's off.
That's right. Well, guess what? We're off now. There's the music. Preacher got to quit preaching. You guys listen. It's going to be an amazing week. We got more on tap. As always, let me just remind you, there are more of us than there are of them. God is still very much on his throne. Y'all stay in the fight. We'll see you tomorrow.